Hi everyone, I'm Any New Province, and this week we're playing Disciple Affinity for Net Benefits, the series where we explore the benefits of net decking in Pauper. Disciple Affinity is an awesome deck by Magic Online player Blinkmoth Nexus, who's trying to kill their opponent off the top of their deck with inexpensive eggs like Chromatic Star and Terrarian and Disciple of the Vault. I think Blinkmoth Nexus was able to take this Affinity deck to a 5-0 finish in a Pauper league because it leans into that unfair part of Affinity that doesn't interact with the opponent at all but just combos them out. Before I break down the rest of Disciple Affinity, I just want to let you know that you can like the video and subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Alright, let's have a look at Disciple Affinity. The most interesting card in Disciple Affinity is Disciple of the Vault. It costs 1 black mana for a 1/1, and whenever an artifact is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. While some of our artifacts can sacrifice themselves, we'd much rather be sacrificing them to an ATOG. ATOG costs 1 and a red for a 1/2 that allows you to sacrifice an artifact and give it +2/+2 until end of turn. If you've played against Affinity any number of times, you know the scariest thing an Affinity player can do is tap out and sack all of their artifacts to make ATOG huge before resolving this next spell, Fling. Fling costs 1 and a red for an instant. As an additional cost to cast Fling, you sacrifice a creature. Fling then deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to any target. What makes Disciple of the Vault more interesting in this build than traditional Affinity is the number of eggs we're running. Eggs is a nickname for artifacts that cost 1 mana and can be sacrificed to draw cards while doing other things. Our first egg is Chromatic Star. Chromatic Star costs 1 generic mana for an artifact that you can pay 1, tap, and sacrifice to add 1 mana of any color. When it's put into the graveyard, you draw a card. We're also running Terrarion. Terrarion costs 1 mana for an artifact that enters the battlefield tapped. When it's untapped, you can pay 2, tap, and sacrifice it to add 2 mana of any color to your mana pool. When Terrarion is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card. Our next card isn't technically an egg, but it does only cost a single generic mana, so we can commit it to the battlefield early and get our Affinity count up for our ATOGs or for our Affinity creatures. This is Springleaf Drum. It costs 1 generic mana for an artifact that you can tap and tap an untapped creature you control to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. We're hoping to chain tons of these eggs together off the top of our library to get as many Disciple of the Vault triggers as possible. The way we're going to do that is with Ethereum Sculptor. Ethereum Sculptor costs 1 and a blue for a 1/2 artifact creature, and it makes your artifact spells cost 1 less to cast. This means all of our eggs can eventually get down to 0 mana, which means we can keep sacrificing them to ATOG, keep drawing new eggs, keep playing them out, and turn it into this kind of Disciple of the Vault trigger engine. Our next set of artifacts don't cost 1 mana, so they might not have the traditional egg nickname, but they do still draw cards and they're great sacrifice fodder. First, we have Ichor Wellspring. It costs 2 generic mana for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield or is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you get to draw a card. Ichor Wellspring is more powerful than any of our other eggs while we're trying to combo off because it lets you look 2 cards deeper, making it a lower chance that you'll fizzle. Finally, our last can-tripping artifact is Prophetic Prism. It costs 2 generic mana for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. You can pay 1 and tap Prophetic Prism to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. We're going to have to draw into a lot of pieces to get the ATOG, Disciple of the Vault, Ethereum Sculptor egg engine going, and to do that, we've included some raw card advantage. The first piece of card advantage is Thoughtcast. Thoughtcast costs 4 and a blue for a sorcery, but it has affinity for artifacts, which means this spell costs 1 generic mana less to cast for each artifact you control. Most of the time, we're only going to be casting it for blue mana. This card is absolutely busted because it draws you 2 cards. We're also running a single copy of Perilous Research, which goes along perfectly with all of our artifacts that want to be sacrificed. Perilous Research costs 1 and a blue for an instant that allows you to draw 2 cards, then sacrifice a permanent. You can use Perilous Research in response to one of your opponent's removal spells on an artifact creature. You can use it on one of your lands if your opponent has a Gorilla Shaman down and you've got to draw on 2 and answer. It's just amazing when you can sacrifice a Terrarian or a Chromatic Star because you draw 3 cards for 2 mana. Finally, our last non-land card is a little bit more in line with traditional Affinity. It's Mere Enforcer and costs a whopping 7 generic mana, but we're actually going to be casting it for 0 a lot of the time. Mere Enforcer Monster is a 4/4 artifact creature with affinity for artifacts, which means it costs 1 less generic mana for each artifact you control. All right, let's have a look at this mana base. Of course, we're running 12 copies of the powerful artifact lands. These kind of act like basic lands, except they're artifacts, so they can be sacrificed to Atog and get some Disciple of the Vault triggers. First, we have Darksteel Citadel, your artifact land that taps for colorless. We have Great Furnaces, they tap for red. We have Seat of the Synod, they tap for blue, and we have Vault of Whispers to tap for black. Instead of basics or more artifact lands, we're running 3 copies of Lonely Sandbar so that we don't fizzle while we're comboing off. You can do that by cycling Lonely Sandbar for 1 blue mana to draw a new card off the top of your deck. All right, let's have a look at this sideboard. First, we have 4 copies of Hydroblast for countering all of our opponent's burn spells. We have 3 copies of Pyroblast for those counterspell matchups that can disrupt our combo. We have a single copy of Gorilla Shaman for an Affinity Heavy Mirror. We have 4 copies of Krark Clan Shaman for wrathing the board of X1s. We have 2 copies of Reaping the Graves for when we're comboing off and need to get a bunch of creatures back. And we have a single copy of Serene Heart for fighting against Boggles. And there you have it, Disciple Affinity by Blink Moth Nexus. Congratulations again on your 5-0 with this sweet deck. We're going to take it into a league at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince this Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Atlantic time. We're there every Wednesday night playing competitive PauperDecks. Before I go, I just want to remind you that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and hopefully I'll see you on Wednesday night.